Picture this scenario. You're in the middle of making a game and things are going pretty well, but you've hit a bit of a roadblock. Namely that you've come to the realization that coming up with original concepts is actually really hard. So, what do? Simple. Just steal from other works, no one will even notice. Until they do, in which case you'll be called out on social media at best, or sued into oblivion and blacklisted from the industry at worst. With risks that high, you'd assume no one would be dense enough to plagiarize in the game industry, especially given how easy it is for people to make comparison posts and videos once they notice something's up. In which case, you really underestimate how thick and lazy some people in this business can be, especially when they have the undeserved confidence that no one will catch them. Though then again, they're plagiarists, they're not exactly a smart bunch, are they? So how about you come along with me as I shed light on some of the most bizarre cases of video game plagiarism that I could find, and definitely didn't plagiarize from anywhere. I'm fully confident that I don't need to explain what Dragon Ball is, and if you do need that explanation, shut up, you're lying. Anyway, given how omnipresent Dragon Ball is within general pop culture, there's a near countless amount of games based on the series, with one of the most known sub-series of DB games being the Budokai series, a trilogy of fighting games for the PlayStation 2 that were made by Dimps, who would go on to also make the Shin Budokai series for the PSP, as well as the Xenoverse games. For the longest time, the Budokai games were often heralded as some of the best, or at least the most popular Dragon Ball games to release, the only ones able to match it being the Budokai Tenkaichi series and 2018's Dragon Ball FighterZ. So naturally, when it was announced that the first and third Budokai games would be getting HD remasters in 2012 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, people were very excited. By the way, if you're wondering why Budokai 2 wasn't included, when people started playing the game, however, they immediately noticed something had changed. Specifically, both games' soundtracks had been completely replaced with a mix of both new songs made specifically for the remaster, and music pulled from other Dragon Ball games like Budokai Tenkaichi 2 and 3. Whilst this probably confused casuals, the more hardcore Dragon Ball fans immediately knew why this happened, as just 1 year prior in 2011, Toei announced that Kenji Yamamoto, the composer behind the Budokai series, as well as many other Dragon Ball games and the first 95 episodes of Dragon Ball Z Kai, had been fired from the company under suspicions that a lot of the music he made for the franchise had actually been plagiarized from multiple other sources. Now, it's not uncommon for people to take inspirations from their peers or music they like, but to most people, Yamamoto's work crossed the line of being inspired to just flat out copying other people's music with one or two small additions. For fear of copyright, I won't play any music comparisons here. However, if you are curious about some of the acts that Yamamoto has been accused of stealing from, they include, but aren't limited to, Stratovarius, The Chemical Brothers, Earth, Wind & Fire, Disturbed, The Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Black Sabbath. I think from that list alone, you can probably easily tell why this guy hasn't had any work since 2011. Though say whatever you want about him, he was definitely one to show how to go even further beyond, to levels of plagiarism previously thought impossible. Time to talk about one of the most modern games I've ever discussed, as it's one that hasn't actually released yet, with the currently upcoming Marathon, a PvP extraction shooter made by Bungie, which in addition to being a revival of one of their older franchises, the original Marathon releasing in 1994 exclusively for Apple Macintosh, it's also marking the studio's first release since Destiny 2 came out in 2017, as well as the first since they were purchased by Sony in 2022. Now, to put things mildly, Bungie's reputation in these last few years hasn't been great exactly, primarily thanks to a mix of the waning popularity of Destiny, the studio almost consistently missing revenue projections by unfathomably large margins, and constant waves of employee layoffs whilst the CEO was allegedly using money from the Sony purchase to buy cars. So yeah, not quite as beloved as they were during the Halo days, which in turn means they couldn't afford any negative press for Marathon, which was already having rumors and speculation of a hellish development cycle. In April 2025, Bungie held a closed alpha test which was initially restricted via an NDA, but was later reverted so that they could get feedback from players. And whilst they may have expected some negative opinions on the game's current state, the brunt of the backlash was not one they were anticipating, as shortly after footage of the alpha started being released, a Scottish independent artist called Fern Hook, also known as Anti-Real, posted comparisons showing that multiple art pieces she had posted publicly around 2017 had been stolen and put into the game without permission. The comparisons were not only incredibly damning when put side by side, but also led to large swaths of mockery, as not only had the art style been one of the few things almost unanimously praised by people who played the alpha, but one of the designs that had somehow made it into the game was a pattern of lines known around the internet as the Loss meme, which if you don't know what that is, watch either the Justin Wang or Magic Nush video. Bungie would attempt to write this off as being something done by an artist who didn't work for them anymore, which people might have been able to believe if this was the first time something like this happened. Instead, this was the fourth time Bungie had been caught stealing artwork within the last 5 years, with similar incidents having popped up revolving around stolen artwork being used in cutscenes for both the Witch Queen and Lightfall expansions for Destiny 2, in addition to the design of a Destiny-themed Nerf gun, not to mention a currently ongoing lawsuit which claims that the narrative of Destiny 2's Red War campaign was copied from a story published on a WordPress website in 2013. Bungie have since claimed that they're going to scrub through the game's art assets to find any other stolen artwork, which has led people to speculate that given the game's already troubled development, it could likely cause the title to get delayed beyond its original 2025 release date, or more pessimistically, could cause it to get cancelled outright, with the game, and maybe even Bungie as a whole, both seemingly being destined for failure. That last one was a bit of a downer, so let's talk about a company who's never done anything remotely shady. Disney! Specifically, we're going to be looking at the Crazy Castle series, a line of platformers made by Kemco which released for the NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance, which in Japan had Roger Rabbit as the lead for the first game, with most subsequent entries starring Mickey Mouse, though due to Capcom having the exclusive rights to Disney games outside of Japan, they were altered to swap him out for another character for the international releases, the most frequent choice being Bugs Bunny. For this video, we'll be focusing on 1993's Mickey Mouse 4: The Magical Labyrinth, which in America was changed to instead be based on Ghostbusters, specifically its spin-off cartoon series, The Real Ghostbusters, whilst the European version made Garfield the main character. Regardless of which animal you're playing, whether it be Mouse, Cat, or Bill Murray, the overall game is the same, being a puzzle platformer where you need to get to the end of each level, all the while using bombs to defeat enemies and some kind of weapon to destroy blocks by the character's feet. Overall, nothing that immediately sticks out as odd. Well, I mean, outside of the proton pack now being a drilling tool instead of a ghost catching device, unless you happen to be the kind of person that played puzzle platformers for the Amiga and/or the Commodore 64, as some people later discovered that the entire game is actually an unlicensed Game Boy port of a title called PP Hammer and His Pneumatic Weapon, which came out 2 years earlier in 1991, with Kemco's rendition not only lifting over the gameplay, but also entire level designs, figuring no one would notice. And to be fair, I don't think most people did, as the first official confirmation of it being stolen was in 2015, when the developer of the Amiga version of PP Hammer confirmed via a tweet that Kemco never actually contacted them or asked for permission to make their version of the game. So for all the Americans who played this game and wondered why Venkman was using the proton pack for digging and decided to just kill the ghost with explosives, it's because you were actually playing an unrelated Amiga platformer the whole time. Jury's still out on if this is something Mickey or Garfield would do. So far we've covered games that, whilst being undeniable in their plagiarism, they were still all cases where the average person might not have recognized it. Yamamoto wasn't really caught until the early 2010s, despite composing Dragon Ball media since the 90s. People only found out about Marathon's stolen artwork after the original artist called them out, and over 2 decades had passed before PP Hammer's developer confirmed their game had been stolen and reskinned. But this last one is a case where the theft was so blatant and unprofessional that it makes you question how anyone could possibly think no one would notice. The game in question, Limbo of the Lost, which was made by Majestic Studios, with its creation often being credited to 3 people. Steve Bovis and Tim Croucher, who came up with the initial idea for the title back in the early 90s as a mostly text-based game for the Atari ST, along with Lawrence Francis, who joined when the development restarted in 1995 as a point-and-click adventure game for the Amiga 500. The game would end up getting stuck in development hell until 2008, when it finally released as a 3D point-and-click game for Windows 98 and XP. Despite the long wait for it to come out, just a few days after its US release, Tri-Synergy, who served as the game's American publisher, announced they would temporarily stop all distribution of the game due to accusations of stolen assets being discovered, with the developers putting out a statement soon after that, as a result of said unauthorized content being found, they agreed to allow Tri-Synergy, as well as the European publisher G2 Games, to recall any unsold copies immediately. It turns out that quite a lot of assets for the game, primarily the backgrounds and decorative objects, were taken from quite a few sources. Just some of the games that gotten stolen from include Enclave, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, Thief Deadly Shadows, Unreal Tournament 2004, Vampire Masquerade Bloodlines, Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth, Black and White 2, a CryEngine 2 demo, Silent Hill 4, World of Warcraft, Diablo 2, Morrowind, and Oblivion. Hell, not even things that aren't games were safe, as Limbo also features video sequences that take footage from the first Pirates of the Caribbean and the 1997 live-action Spawn movie, truly making for an experience where you're not wondering how much was stolen, and instead how much was actually new stuff made for the game. Shortly after the recall, both Croucher and Francis would announce their exit from Majestic, and in later interviews would cite Bovis as the reason why so much plagiarized content ended up in the final product, claiming they had no idea what was going on due to not handling those aspects of the game, along with adding that they believed he was constantly trying to take full control of development for himself. Whilst it does seem pretty clear that Bovis was the one responsible for including, or at least greenlighting, the use of the stolen art, whether or not you want to believe Croucher and Francis could somehow work on this game for over a decade and never catch on to what he was doing until after the fact, I'll let you decide. Probably the funniest thing about this entire situation is that even if you ignore all the plagiarism, Limbo of the Lost is still a really weird game, but with bizarre characters and strange dialogue, all topped off with a really unfocused story and confusing puzzles, with all the random locations from other games, along with the mysterious miasma that engulfs the title following the recall, creating probably one of the best so bad it's good games you could possibly play. If you are interested in learning more about Limbo, I'd recommend checking out Mandalore Gaming's video on it, but otherwise I think it's about time to wrap things up. And if there's anything to learn from Limbo, it's that when you get caught plagiarizing, people will only remember you as a thief, with any original ideas you had disappearing into the wind. Which sucks when people could remember you for something as incredible as this.
Well, it's nice to see Brick safe and sound, after all he's been around, and in my view he should be crowned the King of Limbo. Well, he's had his ups and he's had his downs, he's had his smiles and he's had his frowns, but I still say he should be crowned the King of Limbo. Oh, what more can a poor boy do, working for the likes of me and you? Oh, what more can a poor boy say, but I could use your help in any way. He took his courage to the brink. If it were me, I would turn to drink.